Let's talk about measuring gauge on granny squares. How do we usually measure gauge on granny squares? Unlike when you're working back and forth, usually when you're measuring gauge on granny squares, we're going to measure the diameter or the side of a square. So the granny squares work from the center out in rounds, and we're going to measure across all the rounds. So not just 4 rounds here, but across all 8 of these rows, but it's 4 rounds. So the pink one, the blue one, the purple one, and the yellow one. I like to use a ruler instead of a tape measure. I think it's easier. I don't have to use my hands to hold things down. And I want to put the 0 mark, if I have a ruler that starts over here with a 0, right on the edge and go straight across the middle to the other side. Now, one thing that happens when you're looking at a granny square, it can be a little bit tricky. It's hard to be super precise. As I look at this square, I can see I have kind of the inside edge of that top stitch and then the outside edge of that top stitch. And sometimes, depending on how my granny square was blocked or something, I've got that outside edge coming in. You can kind of see the V is facing me here and it's not facing me here. That just happens to be how this granny square is showing up for me. I could bring this other one here, and on this one I'm kind of seeing both outside edges. Generally speaking, I just try to choose one or the other. Let's see, let's go from outside to outside edge here. So I'm going to go across here, and I get right at 3.5 inches right here. I don't know how well you can see that, but I'm getting this granny square is about 3.5 inches. I might measure that even a couple of other places, and that's kind of from the outside of the top stitch to the outside of the top stitch. If I brought it in a little bit, it might be a little bit less. Again, it's kind of hard to be precise with granny squares, but I would call this a 3.5 inch square. Let's look at this other yellow square. I mean, it's multiple colors, but I call it yellow. This one is a little bit smaller. Same yarn, same number of rounds, but when I do that same measurement here, I get about 3 1/8. The difference is that on this one, I don't have chain 1 spaces on the side. I have a chain 1 corner and just went straight from one stitch to another and don't have a chain space here, whereas on this one, I have a chain space. So you can't just say a 4 round granny is either this size or this size. You have to know exactly what kind of granny square pattern you are following and make sure that your granny square matches the one that the pattern says, or that you're doing the same granny square each time. Otherwise, you might end up with different sizes. Let's measure another granny square here. I'm going to just do the same thing, working right across the center. On this one, I'm getting about 3 1/4 inches as well. Might not be a bad idea to do it in both directions to see if I'm getting the same thing. The reason I like to do it across the center instead of on the sides is because we kind of don't know where the real corner is here. We haven't labeled that corner or put a marker in it or anything. So it's a little less precise to guess here on these rounded corners. It's much better to go straight across from side to side. Let's do one more. This is a smaller granny square. This one only has 3 rounds, and that one measures 2 and about 2 and 5/8 inches, something like that. And I could measure it in the other direction as well. You can block these a little bit larger if you want, but they are going to come back to whatever shape they want to be. As you join them to other things, their shape and their size may change just a little bit. So you may not be as precise as you might be when you are doing a gauge swatch for, say, a back and forth project, but you can get pretty close. If you'd like more instruction like this, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Check out the links in the video notes for more ways you can find me. Thanks for watching.